Hey, welcome to June 2025. So this month we are in 6 vibration and we're still in the global 9 cycle vibration as well. So 6 vibration, the themes are going to be interesting this month potentially for a couple reasons. 6 tends to literally can go from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. And literally the invitation is for us to balance extremes with this 6 number vibration. So 6 is interesting because it can be the most benevolent caretaker parent archetype, and it can also be the most tyrannical leader. So it's going to be interesting how this plays out on the world stage potentially, because 6 also represents sensitivity to fairness, justice. It's the legal system, but it really has this sense of wanting things to be fair and right. And so we want to be mindful this month not to be locked in our fixed kind of ideologies or beliefs. 6 can be an imbalanced, it can be very rigid and inflexible. So the invitation for us this month is to be kind of trying to find that middle point, but also be potentially open to new ideas, saying that, or new beliefs, but saying that we might also see either individually or on the world stage where we're just really become more aware and not okay with where there's tyrannical leadership or where there's imbalance and injustice on the planet with all beings even. Because 6 is really wanting to, it wants to really show up for the community and show up for as an advocate for the public. So it's the public server. So keeping in mind, the 6 is interesting too, because it represents in its higher consciousness essence, it represents the understanding that when we are having a conversation with the world, we're actually having a conversation with ourselves. So you know the adage, as within, so without. So this is a great month to kind of really look at that, because relationships are a theme this month with 6. So is family and home. So it could also be like we might not be able to do much yet on the outer, well, on the world stage as far as really getting in there and making changes. Yet saying that, when we bring it back home to ourself and to our own dynamics, our own relationships, our own home, we can land it in our own life. That's when we really truly do make a difference and have impact on the changes that are happening in the outer world. So, Gandhi said, be the change that we want to see in the world. So this is a great month to kind of take measure of that. Where am I? How am I relating to the world? How am I feeling about it? And then bringing it back to what is it that I really want to see out there? And there might be a more sensitivity to, again, this just more nurturing energy, more fair energy, more balance in that way. So then it's asking, how can I start to cultivate that within myself, with my relationship with myself? How can I start to cultivate that in my relationships, in my family, in my home, in my own community? Where can I start and how can I start if that resonates? And again, the most powerful thing, it's not that we necessarily have to go into action. It means that we want to go into alignment. And that alignment means I'm feeling and living as authentically as I can to myself and to the vibration that I want to hold and see for the outer. So if I'm advocating for peace, then am I feeling peace? Am I aligning peace? Am I cultivating peace? And that does not mean that we're being codependent and we're people pleasing. So that's the other kind of shadow with the 6, is to be mindful that we're not just doing what we need to do to keep the status quo to avoid conflict. Yet how do we do that without creating conflict? So learning how to speak our truth, learning how to be clear on what our truth is, speak our truth, and really come into that sense of alignment so that we can then cultivate and create that in the outer. So 6 is, it's an interesting number, because we've got these extremes. So we could have just the most amazing server, but we can have also the martyr archetype that just builds this resentment because it's over serving, it's overdoing. And so again, where am I responsible this month? That's a great question to ask ourselves too, is where am I responsible? Do I need to take more responsibility with some things, or do I need to back off? Am I being too responsible and I'm not letting other people show up? I'm not allowing other people just to, shine their light, express themselves. And again, we're not responsible for somebody else's, emotions and their process. We are responsible though for being mindful, being mindful of, when I'm acting or I'm doing something, what's the consciousness from which I am acting? And what I mean by that is, again, how am I relating to this and how am I showing up and why? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I saying what I'm saying? So back to the alignment, if we want to come into alignment, say we want to focus on peace, and family could be a really big theme this month because 6 represents family. It represents marriage. And so there might be some, changes that happen in that field too. But, there's often just such a interesting trigger that can happen with us that only our families can potentially, stir up for us. So, or our marriage, if we're in a marriage. So it could be, or have been in a marriage. So it could be that, there's some healing around that. But there's also some, stepping back and saying, okay, I've been relating from this. Do I have some inner child work here to do? Or I've been relating from this. Am I still wanting to operate from potentially that narrative? Do I have any wounding here? But most importantly, how do I now want to start to, again, show up? Or how can I do this differently? And that's not always easy. So the invitation for us is also remember that we're also reparenting ourselves and to be really gentle and loving with ourselves in the process. The great thing with the 6 is it invites us to actually scratch into the surface, to go a little bit deeper. Now, some people can have fear with that. Fear kind of going into, it's kind of like diving down deeper into the ocean. But once we get into that deeper elements of the ocean, there's a silence and a sacredness and just this, deeper connection that's available. So 6 sometimes though wants to stay kind of on the surface and it can get caught up in the mundane. So this month, we want to kind of be mindful of that too, mindful of, are we just doing? And can we just slow down and kind of come back into finding that balance potentially, but also starting to take some time maybe to cultivate some deeper inner stillness or just a sense of, what does sacred mean to me? Going, sitting under a tree, that could just feel like so sacred, or, communicating in some way with animals, or, communicating again differently with our, in our relationships, So that's the invitation for us. 6 also represents self-esteem. So again, depending on what's playing out or what comes up and shows up for us personally, either in our exposure to the world stage or in our own individual process, looking at, am I operating out of needed approval from something outside of me? Am I measuring my lovability, my worth, my sense of good enough from something that's coming outside? Or can I land it again within me? Can I come back into me and know, that I am enough and I'm operating from a place of authenticity? Can I come back to that? Just really what's true for me, what's really resonating with me, what is mine, what isn't mine, and just maybe potentially recognizing where we need to believe in ourselves a little bit more. If we feel called to do something, if we feel passionate or inspired to do something, that doesn't mean we're necessarily always going to have the skills, the abilities right off the bat, right off the gateway or whatever that's called. So it's kind of like we're being invited to step back and say, do I need to build my self-esteem in some way? And what would that look like? So, where do I need to have maybe a little bit more confidence or courage within myself? Or to start taking steps, knowing I don't have to be perfect at this, and I don't have to, even necessarily know where I'm going to go with it. Or, maybe I'll fall down a little bit on the way as I try some things or try something different. That could even be as simple as a conversation with somebody, and just kind of like you're not used to speaking your truth and then trying to figure that out and maybe fumbling through that, but giving ourselves a chance to try it. Creative expression is an amazing essence of the 6 vibrations. So great way to move energy this month too is through creative expression. So that could again be, how can I bring in more beauty? How can I express myself through my creativity? So that could be changing your home around, because home's a theme too. So it could be changing your home around, beautifying your home, bringing in some, fresh flowers more, or, just changing things up a little bit. It could be creating just some new recipes, playing with new recipes, things like that. So what does that mean for you? What does creative expression mean for you? And an amazing way to kind of come back into self, to move energy this month, is to apply that and practice that creative expression and dance. Remember the 9, we've got the 9 still playing out, and the 9 is really helping us to let go, to review patterns that are no longer serving. So again, with the 9 this month, both on the world stage, potentially reviewing our history with leadership, and then personally, it could be reviewing our relationships, our patterns around relationships, our patterns of what we've inherited through our dynamics from our family or our home life. If there's been marriages, that could be, and again, that could be like you're a child of divorce. It could be you yourself have experienced that. So there could be some awareness that comes through this month, or some deep healing that can come up this month. 9 still can bring up some deep emotions. So if emotions come up, invitation is let them flow, really let them flow, breathe them out, dance it out. Or how can I be creatively expressing myself to move that energy? So meditation is a good invitation for us this month, or prayer, just kind of going in prayerfulness, thoughtfulness, mindfulness. That's the 6 successes, again, to kind of go down into that deeperness. And meditation or prayerfulness is kind of like just the gateway for that. It doesn't have to be in that, but it's inviting us to touch and to connect with the sacred. All right, so invitation this month is to have a beautiful month, and to, if it resonates, seek out the sacred. When we start to seek something, it starts to seek us. So seeking the sacred. 6 is asking us to deepen our faith and trust. What does that mean for us uniquely and individually? So have a beautiful, beautiful month. Namaste.